disclosure, I'm Robin Farzad.
It's just been strange that they've done this. It doesn't make any sense. The reality is it doesn't fix the fact that they've got real problems, and we think there's ways to fix it if we were Disney. We think strategically they need to reposition ESPN and they need to diversify their business. And, if you think back to 1995, they went out and they bought Cap Cities ABC, which actually got them ESPN. That was a massive change for Disney. I'm surprised they're not looking for something to dramatically alter their business mix today.
It's the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. Come inside, it's fun inside. Unless, of course, you're bearish on Disney stock. That will get you blocked by the CEO on Twitter and quarterly earnings calls by Disney. Meet the guy on Wall Street taking on the big mouse house. Stay with us. Full disclosure is made possible by the generous support of Elwood Thompson's customer empowerment, non-GMO, no advertising to children, really the best market in all of Virginia. You must try them out at the corner of Elwoods and Thompson's and at elwoodthompsons.com. Joining us from New York, BTIG's Rich Greenfield, veteran Wall Street media and tech analyst. I've been reading his good research for 20 years now, since he and I first crossed paths back at Goldman Sachs at the turn of the century. How are you, good sir?
I'm really great. I mean, the media space is going through some really major changes, and so it's been a very, very busy summer.
I want to know what, I want to know what's the beef with Disney. You've really been in the headlines most recently because Bob Iger, the very well paid, very powerful CEO of Disney, which owns ESPN, which has the theme parks, which has the storied library that's going to break away from Netflix in a few years, blocked you on Twitter. That's rather unprecedented.
Look, our job is not to make friends with management teams. We're paid, and our job is to help investors, our clients who are investing in the media and technology sector. Our job is to help them make money. And so we're looking at what stocks we like and don't like. And we think Disney is a stock that is overvalued, principally because of their missteps on the cable network side. And we think when Bob Iger and John Skipper for your listeners is the head of ESPN, when they were looking at sports rights, we think they substantially overpaid for things like the NBA, continued it by buying more college football rights or college sports rights. And the problem that's happened is that they have fixed contracts where they have to pay out to sports leagues regardless of how many subscribers they have. And the problem is ESPN subscribers are going down. Advertising is weakening. Nobody's watching SportsCenter anymore. The new SportsCenter is Twitter. It's not, tuning in at 6 o'clock or at midnight to watch SportsCenter. And so ratings are in trouble at ESPN, especially for the non-live event programming. But their cost structure is largely fixed and growing.
So, Rich, explain this for me. It's almost like an underfunded liability or an underfunded pension, that they have all of these promises that they've made going out, because they always thought up until recently in perpetuity that there'd be growth in ESPN, which is the cash cow for Disney. They own ABC, they own theme parks, they own a ton of things in cable networks, but they've been able to pass on ridiculous price increases year after year after year because it's the indispensable, non-DVRable ESPN after all. I mean, whether you're talking about college football or NBA basketball or
Robin, you just nailed it. I mean, I think that comment of it was the bundle, right? So every listener you had, everyone who was subscribing to multi-channel television, and up until a few years ago, virtually everyone in America, 100 million homes, were subscribing to multi-channel television. And whether they ever watched ESPN or ESPN2, they were paying $8 a month as part of their cable bill, if not more, to have ESPN there. That was an incredible business for ESPN. Not so great for consumers, especially if you didn't watch ESPN, but it was a great business for ESPN. And so I think ESPN is kind of they're the poster child for over-earning in the cable network era. And what's happening now, and our criticism of Disney, is that business is starting to be dismantled by the rise of over-the-top on-demand television. So Netflix, Amazon, Apple's just beginning. Obviously, you've seen massive rise in Facebook, in video. YouTube's obviously huge. All of that is contributing to less time spent watching television. I mean, ratings on TV are literally collapsing, especially for the younger and middle-aged demos. Older, the real old demos, meaning 65 plus, are still watching TV similar to what they used to. But all the other demos, ratings are collapsing, advertising softening, but also the less you watch, the less propensity you have to subscribe to these big, expensive packages of television. They didn't see that coming. I mean, honestly, I think Iger, Skipper, they just didn't see this type of precipitous drop in ESPN subscribers coming.
How can you not, though? If you poll any college kid, I hate to use the millennial term, but these people don't pay for cable. These people who were born kind of in the disruption, who came of age, who became adults in the 2008, 2009 era, this is just not a part of their worldview, the $108 a month thing and countenancing, ridiculously above inflation price hikes every year from ESPN. So I don't understand. This is one of the biggest companies and media companies in the world. You would think it would have some modicum of prescience with this.
I think what makes it even worse is that in many ways, the success of over-the-top TV was fueled by companies like Disney. I mean, there's probably if someone's going to write a book on, how Netflix came to be, one of the key drivers is clearly the Walt Disney Company. I mean, not only did they give them access to their movies, which I don't think was absolutely critical, but when you look at who sells the most content of any content company to Netflix, it's probably Disney. When you look across movies, all the Marvel TV shows, all the Disney animated catalog that's on there, I think coming out next week or in 2 weeks is going to be Pocahontas and Mulan. I mean, there's just a ton of Disney content on Netflix. And so in many ways, Disney's helped create this Netflix monster that is now kind of wreaking havoc on the multi-channel ecosystem that they need to survive. And the reason, you mentioned kind of our attack on Disney, the reason we focused on Disney is that unlike a lot of the other companies, Disney has by far the most dependence on the legacy bundle because they have this fixed cost structure that you mentioned, this, kind of, you called it an unfunded liability. I just think about it as they have commitments that they have to pay. Contingent, they're not contingent on anything. They are paying these payments out to the NFL, out to the NBA, regardless of how many subscribers they have. And so Disney's not going bankrupt. I mean, this is not do they have the cash to do it or the liquidity to do it? It's more of just, look, Disney's going to be a smaller business. ESPN is going to shrink. It's not going away. It's just going to be a smaller business. But investors in Disney expect growth. It's going to be very hard to grow when such a large piece of your company is in secular decline.
You've had a sell rating on Disney shares since December of 2015. Previous to that, you rated it a buy from 2010 to early 2015, and you've been right on the stock. I mean, it had a period, I think, a couple of years ago where there was a reckoning. There was a kind of 180-degree turn, like, wow, cord cutting is happening. We had Michael Wolff on the show a couple of years ago. The stock has since fallen something like 20%, and I noticed that you were really raising your hand, and you posted a photo of yourself with an ESPN t-shirt raising your hand on Twitter saying, "We are in queue and ready for Disney's earnings call." You CC'd the Walt Disney Corporation and Bob Iger, and you were not allowed to ask a question on that call. And then on top of that, you were blocked on Twitter.
Well, look, I think that's what's so interesting. It's not like we've been wrong, right? I mean, we're not causing the stock to go down. We're pointing out the challenges, and investors clearly have sold the stock, and you've seen Disney meaningfully underperform, not just its peers, but, look at the market over that, from December 18 till now. Disney's been a pretty poor stock on any metric. And so what's strange is, the company has not returned our phone calls. They don't return our emails. They don't take our questions on conference calls. They don't allow us to attend analyst meetings where every other investor and analyst who does my job is allowed to attend. They've literally just cut off all access. I mean, in fact, his Twitter account is public, and he's denying access to me on Twitter. It's just, it's very bizarre behavior from a company that, traditionally upholds themselves to the highest standards. It's just been strange that they've done this. It doesn't make any sense. The reality is it doesn't fix the fact that they've got real problems. And we think there's ways to fix it if we were Disney. We think strategically they need to reposition ESPN and they need to diversify their business. And, if you think back to 1995, probably not too long before you and I started talking, they went out and they bought Cap Cities ABC, which actually got them ESPN. That was a massive change for Disney. I'm surprised they're not looking for something to dramatically alter their business mix today, especially given how good their movie business has been.
Well, what moves the needle on Disney? It's almost like an iPhone embarrassment of riches things with Apple. It's become so successful, ESPN, that it's become the lion's share of profit and profit margin at the company. How do you, it's an innovator's dilemma. How do you disrupt that? And how do you replace that with something else that's going to move the needle? After all, this is an enormous company.
Well, look, we've been highly critical of them continuing to sell as much content as they did to Netflix. And so we like the move to go direct that they announced a couple of weeks ago. In concept, I think the problem with what they're doing is that they're thinking of it in a very traditional world, meaning they're still thinking in the world of silos. They're thinking in a world of Disney Channel, ESPN, ABC. They're not thinking of in what I think of as the new bundle. So the new bundle is not channels that get aggregated. The new bundle is content. And so look at the way Netflix bundles all different forms of content. You've got Seinfeld to Disney content to DreamWorks content to Ozarks to Orange is the New Black. There's just an array of all different forms of content. Disney, though, is trying to create direct-to-consumer services where there's going to be Hulu for the ABC and the freeform content. There's going to be an ESPN add-on, not even the good stuff like Monday Night Football and NBA, but it's going to be a kind of tertiary game over-the-top service. Then there's going to be a Disney Channel service that launches in 2 years, and they're not sure what they're going to do with Marvel or Lucasfilms. They should be building a bundle. They should be doing exactly what Netflix is doing and building a robust bundle of all of their content. Now, it's expensive. It would cost them a lot more money and be a far riskier strategy. But Bob Iger and Disney should be playing for the next 20 or 30 years, not trying to figure out how they kind of have their cake and eat it too, so that they don't disappoint Wall Street in the next 12 to 18 months. They're playing the Wall Street game. They're not playing the strategic, go for the kill over the next 10-year game.
How do you even picture out the next 10 years? Could anybody 10 years ago have told you that Facebook today would be worth $488 billion compared to Disney's $157 billion, which is just inconceivable, right?
Robin, it's pretty crazy, right, that Apple could buy Disney for cash. I don't think 10 years ago, if I had said that to you, you would have laughed at me for sure.
And then another thing, like it must have blindsided you when AT&T made this very rich offer for Time Warner, which owns HBO, the very popular and indispensable HBO, which people get on HBO Direct. And it seems like they might throw in some things for free with the wireless bundle. Maybe the bundle is moving away from cable to a whole different universe. And now Disney's orphaned, where you want them to focus on, right sizing maybe the ESPN cost structure. Maybe there's a whole other existential dilemma for them. Do they need to shack up with a Verizon?
Well, think about it. The bundle is also being redefined. It's not just about video content. For Amazon, it's 2-day shipping. It's discounts at Whole Foods starting on Monday. It's video content, music. It's a complete redefinition of what a bundle is. And so, for Amazon, I think if there's anyone that Disney should be scared about, you said, what is Disney going to look like in 10 years? Well, or ESPN for that matter. Imagine waking up in 2022 and you go to watch Monday Night Football and it's only available on Amazon because that contract ends in a few years. And I think Amazon's going to have, we'll have substantially more subscribers in the U.S., let alone globally, than ESPN. If Amazon or Apple, pick any of these large tech companies which have, far bigger pocketbooks, if they want Monday Night Football, it's theirs for the taking. Disney, with declining subscribers and softening advertising, isn't in a position to go from $2 billion for Monday Night Football to 2.5, 3, or $3.5 billion. Whereas a company like Amazon or Apple could easily spend $3 billion a year, if not more. And so I think the risk is that the one thing that's holding the TV bundle together, and certainly the one thing that supports ESPN, which is football, they don't have a lot of firepower to keep those rights. So they're in a very, very precarious position as we think out over the next few years. And again, that goes back to why we think Disney has to diversify away from cable networks, because ESPN is in deep, deep trouble as you look out over the next 5 to 10 years.
Full disclosure, I'm Robin Farzad. We're talking to BTIG's Rich Greenfield, veteran Wall Street media and tech analyst. Step back and talk to me about Apple, which is, after all, the biggest company in the world by market capitalization. Recently announced that it wants to re-up its content building efforts by infusing $1 billion into it, which is, like a nickel that you find in the couch if you're the CEO of Apple. They are the ones that have the device that everybody's passionate about, that everybody's binging Netflix on, whether it's an iPad or an iPod, an iPhone Plus. How do you interpolate their plans into this? Like you said, they could buy Disney for chump change. They do have shared DNA with Steve Jobs and Pixar and the rapprochement of the late 90s, and then ultimately selling Pixar. What do you think about that?
Look, Disney could certainly buy or be bought by Apple. I think the problem that you run into is if you're Tim Cook, if you're Eddie Q, why would you want to be shackled to the legacy cable bundle? I mean, we just spent the last 10 minutes talking about all the problems of the big bundle. It prevents you from going over the top with your content. Subscribers are in decline. It's just, it really entangles you in this ecosystem. Compare that to a Netflix, which has a clean slate, no entanglements, can do whatever they want, not just here, but all over the globe. I mean, Disney made this big announcement about going direct to consumer. First of all, they can't even do it for 2 years because of their entanglements, but they can't even do it globally because they have entanglements all over the world that make that difficult and would make it a much, much longer term process. And so for Apple, why do you want to be kind of hamstrung by the legacy challenges of the ecosystem? And, the response you could say, Robin, is, well, they would get Marvel and Lucas and Pixar, Disney, like they would get the world's most incredible content. And the answer is sure. But what I think Netflix has actually started to prove is that if you want to be a major player in Hollywood, all it takes is money. It really, obviously it takes the skill of the person picking and the team that you build. And Ted Sarandos should get a lot of credit for that. But at the end of the day, if you want to put serious money to work and go out and hire the best talent and the best scripts and writers and all of that, it just takes money. And 4.5 years ago, there was no House of Cards. And now there's more great stuff to watch on Netflix than any one person can consume. And so I think it makes probably a lot more sense for Apple, since they have this incredible balance sheet, to do a straight build from scratch. Therefore, no entanglements. Go out and hire the best writers. And look, they just hired 2 of the top TV production executives in the game right now from Sony. They're building that team out. And I think they're going to, you mentioned the $1 billion number. Netflix used to spend $1 billion on original programming too. And now they're spending, $8 billion on, acquired and original programming. And so I think this is literally a sign that Apple is not going to go out and buy Disney or save Disney. This is going to be, Apple's going to be yet another disruptor, putting even more pressure on the legacy bundle that we've already seen come from the Netflixes and the Amazons. Apple's got the balance sheet, and they're going to start to replicate it on a global basis.
Rich, you recently wrote, you singled out Disney. You said, when historians look back on who is to blame for the rise of Netflix, we believe they will focus their attention on Disney under the leadership of Bob Iger, the CEO. Disney has sold Netflix more content across film and TV than any other company, with Netflix now a monster that we believe has achieved escape velocity. But why isn't the blame more diffuse? I recall my first experience with Netflix maybe 10, 12 years ago was ordering DVDs if I want to watch foreign films or indie films or blockbusters. Why did the studios writ large, all of these guys, I'm talking Universal, I'm talking Warner Brothers, why did they do Netflix any favors? They could have just posted all of their content to proprietary networks. The infrastructure was there. The broadband was there. They could have just had, you put the inconvenience on the customer to have 10 logins. Why did anybody do Netflix favors?
So if you look back, I mean, it's really a fair point. You can't lay all the blame on Disney. I think Disney's given them some of the most iconic content, but the real perpetrator that started this was actually Starz. So Starz had a early stage streaming service that you probably never heard of, but it was called Vongo. Vongo was losing 50 or 60 million. Basically, Starz tried to transform from a pay channel, like you subscribe to Starz as an add-on to your cable system. They tried to transform into an over-the-top company like a Netflix, and they were losing, ballpark, if memory serves, something like $60 or $70 million a year. And this guy, Reed Hastings, comes along and says, you know what? Don't do that. We'll do it for you. Give us those, sub-license us those rights. And that was basically rights to stream in the pay TV window, to stream Disney content along with Sony content. That contract essentially propelled Netflix as the start, because all of a sudden Starz went from losing 70 million to, I think Netflix paid them like 50, 60, 70 million dollars. So it was a huge positive swing for Starz. There was nothing in their contract from Disney that blocked sub-licensing of the digital rights. It just, I'm assuming, wasn't something people had really thought about. Starz did it to basically make money. And in the end, what it actually did was it launched Netflix into the streaming game when they had no access to rights. And so in some ways, it was a quirk of the way contracts were written. And obviously, Netflix then used that to go out and pay for lots of other forms of content. And, the rest is history. But in many ways, Starz was actually the first mistake that was ever made, because it basically started this streaming business for Netflix that never otherwise would have gotten off the ground.
When we look at the legacy networks writ large, who's watching network television right now? We saw a ridiculous stat that millennials think it's ridiculous that you could buy a digital antenna in stores and get 3 networks for free. They're like, wow, seriously, you can do this? But I don't know who watches The Big Bang Theory. I don't know who watches primetime ABC.
Well, look,
it's like the last thing,
Look, there's still a lot of viewership. It's just declining. And look, it's not just, it's declining because why watch live, right? I mean, almost everything that you could watch on linear TV, you can watch later. Maybe not football on Sundays, but the vast majority of the content shows up later someplace else. Whether we're talking Netflix or Amazon or Hulu, the need to watch something live tonight really decreases. And I think it's because there was a fundamental strategic mistake that all of these networks made. When Mad Men came out, you'll remember, no one really watched it in season 1 or 2 on AMC. And it ended up in season 3 going on Netflix, and everyone started to binge Mad Men. They caught up on seasons 1 and 2, and they started watching live. Now, remember, back then, there wasn't a lot of other shows to binge. And so the view that a lot of the networks took was, oh my God, binging actually drives live. And, they got really excited. They saw the same thing with Breaking Bad, that people were catching up and then starting to watch live. But here comes the problem, Robin, is that when there's so much great content to binge, when you can binge all of Friends, all of The Wonder Years, all of Breaking Bad, all of Walking Dead, when there's literally just hundreds upon hundreds of series with hundreds of episodes each that you can binge, binging doesn't drive live. Binging actually drives more binging. And so you binge a show, you catch up to the current time. Then if there's no new episodes available or new episodes are airing live on TV, you just binge something else until all of that season becomes available 6, 9, 12 months later. You don't care. There's so much else to binge. And so the problem is that binging has actually decreased your interest in watching live rather than helped it. And it's been a real strategic mistake, not to mention it's totally altered your desire to deal with advertising. I mean, especially I think the younger demographics, the idea of watching 18 to 20 minutes of advertising an hour and waiting a week between episodes seems like, so antiquated it's beyond belief, right?
So is it antiquated and anachronistic of me to ask you about the movie theater business right now? I mean, that's
No,
one
I
where,
mean, look,
we're getting all this.
I,
We're getting all this
I,
consternation about a $10 a month binge all you watch. I mean, terrible numbers out of AMC. This used to be gravy for a company like AMC, for a company like Disney or Warner Brothers. You take your kids out to a big blockbuster film release, spend a lot of money on popcorn and nachos and Haribo bears. And I just, I might go to one film as a dad now, even. I might go to one movie theater film every 5 years.
First of all, I think you got to separate movie theaters and movie studios. So the movie studio,
they're tied after all because of the whole theatrical experience. I mean, they're not willing to release something. I mean, how willing is Disney, for example, if I want to wrest the bone from the dog's mouth? You have a blockbuster, say a Pixar film come out, Toy Story 5, let's say theoretically. What are they going to do? Offer it up to me $30 direct on demand from Disney's download service? I mean, what's the value proposition to them? They're still entrenched in the old distribution model.
They are. I'm just getting at the point that if I'm Regal, a small change in attendance for Regal, because not only is the company levered, meaning they have a lot of debt relative to their cash flow, but on top of that, most of their, so much of their revenue that they make or earnings comes from popcorn, concession sales, that small changes in attendance are very problematic for the theater industry. For the movie studios, look, I think the question is, does it make sense that they rely so heavily on the theaters? To your point, look, we all are walking around with movie theaters, or, we're all walking around with movie screens in our pockets called our phones. Those phones or those screens keep getting more beautiful and bigger. They seamlessly connect to our TVs and Chromecast or AirPlay or whatever you want to call it. But like the connection to bigger screens is super simple and fluid. And yet try to explain to a millennial, try to explain to one of your friends why something that comes out in the theater, you have to wait, months to see it at home. It doesn't make a lot of sense that you have to go out to the theater to see a movie. And yeah, maybe for the big Star Wars film, it makes sense. But how many movies do you really need to see in the theaters? And there's, with so much great content available at a click of a button through Netflix or Amazon or HBO or whatever, I just think the desire to go out to the movies, especially when the price keeps getting higher and higher and the cost of popcorn is so absurdly high, that I just think it decreases that interest level. And so if I'm a studio, I think I'm absolutely looking for ways to make content available in the home at a premium price that makes it easy and convenient for you. The problem for the theaters is they don't participate in that and don't deserve to participate in that. And so the theaters are in deep trouble. I think the studios are not in great shape, but I think they're in a lot better position if they create great content than the movie theater business that literally does nothing other than have real estate where you go to see a movie and overcharge you for popcorn.
Rich, tell me about Hulu. What should I know about Hulu? I don't have a Hulu login. It's getting a lot of buzz this year with, Golden Globe and Emmy season and their original content efforts. Do you think that's finally congealing and coming together?
God, it's Hulu is like there's such a huge opportunity with Hulu. The problem is it's run by a four-headed monster. To make that clear for your listeners, that's Disney, Fox, Comcast, NBC, and Time Warner. 30-30-30-10 in terms of ownership. It's a very messy ownership structure. And they've gone from being essentially next day television, so where you can watch everything that comes out next day for $8 if you want ads, $12 if you don't want ads, to now they're actually trying to do linear television channels like a subscription to Comcast, but all digitally, where you pay $40 a month. And on top of that, they're trying to do original programming as part of those $8 and $12 packages, such as Handmaid's Tale, which was a very well done original TV series that, as you mentioned, is up for, or going to be up for Emmy Awards.
Which kind of hits at the point. I can't understand it. I can't wrap my head around it. It's
exactly.
It's like the It's like the FT's login. It's a great newspaper, but they give me a certain number of things I can read and a metered paywall. And I just, at this point, we're hitting up against a new theme, which is kind of login fatigue. I mean, you're asking me now that I have to know in the back of my head in a couple of years, my kids won't be able to watch Disney content largely on Netflix. We need a separate Hulu login. I have a Spotify login. We think Amazon Prime is the bee's knees. HBO Direct is going to shack up ostensibly with, it's going to be an AT&T thing. I have various sports logins, whether I follow the Los Angeles Lakers on NBA.com or MLB TV. I mean, at some point, you want simplification. I like the fact, Rich, that everything, all the record labels, let's say 90% of the content I want audio-wise is united on Spotify. I know they all complain about that. I know the artists all complain about it. I just don't know how this shakes out outside of that, say, with the Hulu analogy, the four-headed beast. I mean, it's way too late for these guys to say, no, if you want my content, you have to come and pay me directly on my network.
That was a lot of different things, but
well, it just hits how confusing. Like I've said, the metaphor in the past, it feels like we're sipping from a massive fire hydrant right now of content, right? That they've all gotten the binge religion, they've all gotten the original scripted content, The Handmaid's Tale, and blah 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 blah. And there's just not enough time in the day, and their market caps are hemorrhaging, and there's fear and doubt, and Amazon and Apple, and that's why I brought you on the show. What the heck is going to happen?
Well, look, I think first of all, when you stop spending.
No, you should have said first of all, you should take a Valium, Farzad. But anyway, go ahead.
First of all, you're spending $80 to $100 a month. You may even be spending well over that for your cable TV service. Often, if you look at your bill, you're probably paying $10 per box per month to rent equipment that doesn't cost anywhere near that. And is pretty antiquated. I mean, look at your cable TV remote today versus what it looked like 10 years ago, and then look at what phone you were using 10 years ago, probably a Razor versus your iPhone today. And it's pretty sad how little innovation there's been in the cable TV ecosystem over the last decade. And so as you stop paying or as you reduce your spend on cable television, it does free up a lot of consumer wallet share to go after all of these services. And remember, you don't have to sign up for these things for the full year. I mean, if you're a big football fan, you can sign up for Hulu for 6 or 7 months. I mean, Robin, you or I wanted to cancel Comcast after football season. We had to take a day off from work because we actually literally, not only do we have to spend hours on the phone telling them we're canceling, we then literally had to take our equipment, disconnect it, and walk it over to a call center.
Yeah, it's prohibitive.
And then when we wanted it back turned on, we had to take a day off from work to let the installer come. So like the barrier or the friction in the system for legacy television was really, really high. In a virtual world, you can turn on and off any second whenever you feel like. And so, yes, there are a lot of subscriptions, as you're pointing out, but you also don't have to be a subscriber for the full year. If you want to only be a subscriber to HBO for Game of Thrones season, lots of people do that now. It's easy. You don't even have to call up Comcast anymore. You literally just click cancel on the app on your iPhone. It takes literally a few seconds.
So amid this dislocation, Rich, in the 10 minutes or so that I still have you, why, when I look at Apple and Google, are Apple TV and YouTube so half-assed kind of in this competition, especially Apple TV? You would think amid that confusion and the fact that everybody has either an Android phone or an iPhone that they would pounce on this and they would simplify and unify and make it easy.
Well, look, I think in some ways Apple was hoping to work with the legacy ecosystem. I think they really hoped that they were going to be partnered with the whole ecosystem. And I think what they kind of found out is that it was virtually impossible to create the product that they wanted. They wanted to put together a package of the channels you wanted, not the channels that you didn't have interested in. They wanted to change the ad. The problem is everyone is so wedded. The same reason why I said Apple's not going to buy Disney, because of this legacy infrastructure problem. There's too many rules that make it too hard. And so I think you've seen Apple pivot over the last 12 months to, we're just going to go out and follow the Netflix model, the Amazon model, and build a new bundle of content and services direct to consumer. and simply help destroy the legacy ecosystem rather than try to work with it. I think it was just hoping for a long time that they could play ball with their friends in the iTunes ecosystem and then just realizing it was just impossible.
What about you, Rich? How do you make a living? I know that's a hard turn, but it's always been an existential question I had. I mean, when you're entrenched at a huge sell-side firm, back in the day, before all these Spitzerian regulations, you could just direct, good vibes to the investment banking side, or you could direct trades, good calls, like, why don't you put in your big trade with us at Goldman? How do you get paid right now? That's really something I'd like to know.
It's funny. I'm looking at the article you wrote from February 19th, 2007 called An Analyst on the Attack. And, it's really never changed. My job at BTIG is to literally pick buys and sells. To do that, we spend a lot of time thinking about how the tectonic plates of media are moving, who's winning, who's losing, how new companies are disrupting, whether they're public or private, but how all of these players are impacting the public companies that we put buys and sells on. The goal is just simply to help clients make money. If we help investors make money, big institutional investors make money, that's what gets me paid. And so it sounds really complicated, and certainly the forecasting is not simple. But the actual what our job description is, it really is quite simple. Of our goal is to help people make money in trading media stocks, long and short.
But now that all that has effectively been unbundled, and I know it's a tortured analogy here, but we're all talking about, in the end, getting paid for your content. Even though yours is very actionable, very serviceable, it's always been a vexingly difficult thing, whether you're an independent content maker like me, a journalist, you're subsidized by a big publication or a media company, or you're an analyst, you're a practitioner who's calling the ebbs and flows and sector picks and how you can be tactical. How to get people to pay for you versus to just look at you as a freebie within a bundle. I imagine it must be a huge dilemma as a Wall Street person.
I would say, the reality is that we're a 600 person broker dealer. There is, we're, I think, the 14th or 13th largest broker dealer in terms of shares traded globally. So we're not a small firm. This is a very large firm in BTIG. And, the goal is if you like our research, if you find our research valuable, you're going to do business more broadly with BTIG. And, I know you've seen our research for a long time, but, we think our research is unlike anything else out there, very unique stylistically, very thematic, with a goal of making several big calls every year. And we try to be right more than we're wrong, but we certainly admit very openly when we're wrong.
I just want to know when Buybarger is going to finally return your calls. I wonder if you have to pull off like a John Cusack thing and say anything and show up outside of headquarters with an enormous boombox, some sort of, we would take you guys to Camp David or something and you can finally get your 2 quarterly questions in.
As long as we get the stock right, I honestly don't care.
Rich Greenfield, you are a mensch, sir. I cannot thank you enough.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Veteran Wall Street media and tech analyst Rich Greenfield is at BTIG. He's been bearish on Apple. He thinks they need to self-disrupt a little more aggressively, and I will eagerly follow your work on the Twitters and the various platforms that you have self-disrupted yourself through. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Full disclosure, we are on NPR One. Like us, love us, and on iTunes at FullDRadio.com. You can support this fine show on Patreon.com/FullDRadio. We're going to take it to 2 broadcasts a week in 2018. You know what? Miska, Muska, Mouska Tools. Oh, toodles. I'm Robin Farzad. Back with you next week.